Hey, it's Nancy. Before we begin today, I just wanted to let you know that you can listen to Crime Beat early and ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime.
A listener's note. The following episode contains coarse language, adult themes, and content of a violent and disturbing nature, and may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
In 1983, two women in Toronto were violently attacked in their own homes.
People had heard screams at about 1:30, 2 in the morning, and then somebody running through a laneway.
She said, Erin's been killed. And I just remember being so filled of confusion and rage, I leaned over and punched a hole in the wall.
I came down the stairs and my dad announced Sue was stabbed to death. I freaked out, like, oh my God, like how does this happen?
There were no obvious signs of who did this.
It's a needle in a haystack. It could be anybody in the world.
It was a frustrating case for police, as investigators faced countless dead ends. At the same time, the families of the victims endured endless heartbreak. I'm Nancy Hixt, a senior crime reporter for Global News. Today, we continue our special series of Crime Beat, where in each episode, I'm joined by one of my colleagues from the TV documentary series. In this episode, Catherine McDonald shares how science helped detectives crack a decades-long case wide open in closure.
November 23rd, 2022 is a day Toronto Police Cold Case Acting Detective Sergeant Stephen Smith will never forget. He'd traveled 850 kilometers from home to lay eyes on a man he and his fellow detectives had waited 40 years to meet.
We go to his house, we see his truck there. So we walk up to knock on his door. We knock on his door, he answers it. I could instantly see in his head that he was in a panic.
What brought Steve to the man's door is a story that began in Toronto in the early 1980s.
In August of 1983, Susan Tice, a mother of 4 children, recently divorced and recently purchased her own home, was living by herself. And she had just returned from a weekend vacation up north with some of her friends.
Susan had arrived back home on Sunday, August 14th, 1983. Michael Boyd is retired now, but he spent 35 years with the Toronto Police Service. He, along with Detective Sergeant Stephen Smith, shared with me the details of what happened next.
She arrived home on Sunday with a friend at about 11 o'clock in the evening and unloaded her car. There was a canoe or a kayak type boat. After unloading, her friend needed a ride home a couple of blocks away. And so she took her friend, dropped her off at home, and then returned to her own place at 341 Grace.
On Tuesday evening, she had plans.
She was supposed to attend a family dinner that night and didn't show up, and the family said that just wasn't like her, but they weren't going to push too much because she was going through some life changes, so who knows what. She may have decided to go off somewhere else.
Ann Chisholm, known as Chizzy to most, was Susan Tice's best friend.
I met Sue, oh my goodness, in 1958. Fred phoned me and said, my girlfriend's going to camp. Would you look after her? Well, we did. We looked after each other. She was a preppy, you know. She had her Bermudas and her shirts with the collars. She laughed at herself. Didn't take herself too seriously. We had a lot of fun together.
Chizzy was there as Susan began her nursing career, got married, and had kids.
She loved being a mom. She loved it. So obviously, that was what she wanted to do in life.
Here's Christian Tice, Susan's daughter.
We had like family gatherings where we always talked. There was always music in the house. There was always people in the house. She was just like the more the merrier. Very adventuresome because she loved sailing, canoeing, like all the camping stuff. So she was very supportive of all of us in our activities. But she wasn't just a mom either. Like, her core was that, us as a family, and it was really important to communicate and do things together and support one another. And I really felt that growing up, that we have this core unit. But she also went back to school when she was like 40-ish, got a master's in social work, had a very good practice like in Toronto, and then did another one in Calgary.
On August 17th, 1983, 16-year-old Christian was at camp in Calgary when she phoned to check in with her mom.
I actually called collect. My uncle answered the phone, and that was when he just found my mom.
Susan had missed plans with her family the previous night. When they didn't hear from her the next morning, her brother went to her home to check in on her. Michael Boyd and Detective Sergeant Stephen Smith have worked on the case, and they shared with me what they found. And I should warn you that the details are graphic in nature.
He arrives at her house, he sees some mail piled up. He goes around back and the back door is open. He enters her home, he sees that it looks like it had been a bit tossed. It wasn't as neat as she normally had kept it. He walks up to the bedroom and he finds Susan deceased. It had looked like she had been stabbed, there was blood, and at that point he calls the police.
We went up to the second floor where Susan's body was located. She was partially on the bed. The sheets and the covers were all strewn, partly covering her. We saw glass on the mattress. There was a broken bottle, and around the top of the bottle there was a towel. Susan's body was cut. Around the head area there was blood in many areas. We went to a bathroom on the second floor, and I could see some blood in the sink, as though perhaps after the crime someone had washed their hands. Her bedroom drawers were ransacked. Her purse was around, and we noticed that there was a book, and we could see that that was a diary. Notes were made right up to the point that she went to bed on the 14th, and then to prepare herself, wrote in Monday, August the 15th. Nothing under that date.
A canvass of the area tells us that people had heard screams at about 1:32 in the morning a couple days previous, and then somebody running through a laneway.
Believe me, it was a very, very extensive canvass. We reached out to all types of other people, like cab drivers that would have been working at that time of night, other people that would have been on the street, public service workers who were out working the night shift.
Mike and his partner accompanied Susan's body to the morgue.
It was going to be a short stop, but we went there first to swab her body and got samples of semen. We had to take Susan from that point down to the Ontario Provincial Police Headquarters, where they have their crime lab.
Using lasers, they tried to lift fingerprints from her body and did several other tests looking for trace evidence.
We did not locate fingerprints, but there were hairs and there were fibers. Around 10 o'clock at night, we returned to the morgue with Susan's body until the post-mortem examination would begin the following day.
The autopsy concluded that after being raped and stabbed 13 times, Susan had bled to death. Meanwhile, in Calgary, 16-year-old Christian Tice waited for news of her mother.
And then the next thing I hear, my brother's coming to visit. He just said, Mom died this afternoon. And that's when you just kind of break. We got on the red-eye flight, and I only knew that she had died. Then I'm told she was killed, but not how or why or what. And we went to this house. My dad announced to a room full of strangers, he goes, might as well tell you, Sue was stabbed to death. And I'm like, what the hell? So I freaked out and I ran out, and I didn't know how to cope with that, because that was the furthest thing from my mind. I just thought maybe it was a robbery or something. And then it wasn't until a year later that Chizzy told me that she was raped.
As Susan's family reeled from the loss, retired Detective Sergeant Mike Boyd said the investigation continued.
There were no obvious signs of who did this, but a number of people needed to be eliminated from suspicion, like Susan's husband, whom she was separated from. Susan had a boyfriend, and we needed to interview him. Hundreds of people phoned in and suggested people who lived in the area, known sex offenders that either lived in the area or worked in the area. There were a lot of names called in, and we were able to actually eliminate every single name of every single person we had on that list.
4 months later, and less than 5 kilometers from where Susan was killed, Erin Gilmour was living in a Yorkville apartment above the store where she worked. Sean McCowan was 13. His brother, Kaylin, was 11 when their big sister moved out.
She was working for a clothing store called Robin Knits, and she wanted to get into the fashion business, and she was, sort of taking courses in and around that. She had gone to the Fashion Institute, and she was just trying to sort of figure out the next step. She was only 22. We would try to see Erin as much as we could. She would come and pick us up, Kaylin and I, and we would spend time with her. We would go to restaurants, go shopping, go hang out with her and her friends, because she would sort of try to take a little bit of the burden off my mom. She was really, really good about making sure that we were looked after. December the 19th, Kaylin and I had gone to Erin's apartment and spent the night over there. We watched movies, had dinner with her, just hanging out with our sister and literally chilling out. Just had a really, really great night. The next morning I got up to go Christmas shopping, and Erin drove my brother home, and that was the last time I saw her.
Detective Sergeant Stephen Smith says on the night of December 20th, 1983, at around 8:45 p.m., Erin finished her shift and went home to get ready. She had plans to go to a Christmas party.
She had went out of the store, locked up to her apartment, and a friend of hers was going to be picking her up about just after 9, but he was a little bit late. He didn't arrive till about 20 after 9.
Just 35 minutes from the time she left work.
When he arrives, he walks in, he finds Erin bound to the bed, and she was deceased, and there was blood, and it appeared that she had been stabbed. You don't expect to find your friend in that condition when you show up. I think he was a bit taken aback, but he goes outside to call the police. Now, we don't know whether the offender was still in the place at the time or whether he had already left, because that's a very, very short window for him to have been in there, commit these offenses, and make good on his escape. But the call's made, officers show up. It's determined that Erin had been sexually assaulted and stabbed to death.
Her brother Sean was at home with her little brother Kaylin. They were completely unaware of what had happened when they went to bed. The brothers woke up hours later to horrible news.
I remember there being a commotion in my room, and my mom was sitting down on the side of my bed. There was just a look on her face, obviously, like a really pained, anguished look. She said, "There's been a terrible accident." And I was kind of, coming to, and I didn't really understand. She said, and I said, "What happened?" And she said, Erin's been killed. And, in an instant, you're sort of just time stops. And I just remember being so filled of confusion and rage. I didn't understand what had happened. And I literally I leaned over and punched a hole in the wall. I had just started a new school, and I was having a lot of, problems adjusting to it. Erin was the person I would turn to. And then all of a sudden to have that taken away from you was a real shock to the system for a long time.
Susan Tice and Erin Gilmour had been brutally attacked in their own homes. Could they have been killed by the same person?
Speaking to some of the old investigators at the time, they believed that these cases were linked, but we had no evidence to say unequivocally they were linked. They went through every single person in these ladies' lives. They went through their dry cleaners, their movers, their cleaners that came into their house, everyone that they went to a party with, every restaurant they attended. They tracked down everybody that came across these two women in their entire lives, and they had to systematically eliminate all these people through, at the time, basically alibi evidence. There was nothing in their lives that crossed over at all. The offender wasn't anywhere on our radar.
Just like Susan's family 4 months earlier, Erin's family mourned her loss. Her brother Sean said they also struggled with the lack of answers.
Nothing was moving the way that you'd like to see it move, right? It wasn't there was a murder and all of a sudden an arrest has been made 3 days later. They had physical evidence from the scene, but they couldn't really attach it to anybody.
Monica Sloan is with the Center for Forensic Sciences in Toronto. She said the only evidence investigators had from the crime scene was a semen sample. And in the 1980s, all they could glean from it was a blood type.
The unfortunate part about these tests is that they weren't very good for being able to distinguish one person from another. For example, if you're type A, you're 40% of the population. So once you have this result, you can use that to compare to samples from persons of interest or persons who you want to eliminate. Even if somebody is that type, however, it will still leave you with the large proportion of people who may be the donor of that body fluid.
As years went by, Sean never gave up hope, seizing any opportunity to appear in the media, appealing to the public for help.
It was almost therapeutic for me as well to sort of just keep Erin's memory alive, keep Erin forward, keep Erin in the news somehow, on the off chance that somebody saw something and knew something.
17 years later, the case finally moved forward, thanks to a new piece of legislation introduced in the year 2000.
All DNA samples from across the country will now be sent to a national data bank in Ottawa.
It contains DNA samples from 5,000 crime scenes and from 21,000 convicted offenders. So far, it has had 214 hits, matching an offender to an unsolved crime.
Monica Sloan said it led to a break in the case.
The DNA profile from the Gilmour case was on our internal database and was uploaded. And then these other cases that we were starting to test as they were suggested to us by police, the Susan Tice matter was one of those. These two samples are now together on the databank, and they match to one another.
Detective Sergeant Steve Smith said they knew for certain that they were looking for the same offender, but they still had no idea who he was.
There was nobody on the National DNA Databank that it matched to. It's a needle in a haystack. It could be anybody in the world. We know it's one person, we know it's a male, but it could be anybody in the world.
Forensic expert Monica Sloan said they had to expand their search.
So in that time period, we do a bunch more comparison samples. And again, people are eliminated by one means or another. And we were doing other things in there, like a keyboard search of people's local databases, using Interpol to access the databases of other countries, the United States. We also did the United Kingdom as well. So those things were being done with sort of negative results.
There's a very good possibility that the person is now deceased, which doesn't stop us or prevent us from solving this case.
Even if Gilmour's killer is dead, police can still get DNA. That would be enough to fill in the blanks and help her family move on. Erin's brother, Sean McCowan, said he hoped the case would propel forward. Instead, his family found more disappointment. Then, in 2015, Detective Sergeant Stacey Gallant took over the cold case unit. He knew Susan and Erin's cases were linked, so he started combing through the files again.
There may have been some casual connection between the offender and the victims. There is no doubt that there are people that are close with this suspect or were close to him back at the time of the offense, and you know that he did this.
Detective Sergeant Stacey Gallant said the appeal to the public led to renewed tips on the case.
Social media would always generate some tips here and there. We would get people call in, we would get new Crime Stoppers tips of potential people of interest. Sometimes those people were already in the file and we had already cleared them. There was many times going through that I thought, okay, this is the one, it's gonna be this guy, or it's gonna be this guy.
Around that time, Detective Sergeant Steve Smith learned about something called investigative genetic genealogy, or IGG.
In 2019, I attended the Canadian Police College and took a course on the very first course on unsolved historical homicides. And while we were there, they had brought up the Golden State Killer.
The Golden State Killer case went unsolved for 43 years. Genealogy helped law enforcement close the case in 63 days.
The investigators provided us with a full day of presentation on how they used IGG to solve all the sexual assaults and murders. Watching it, I really didn't understand what they were doing, but the process seemed like something that we could bring back and apply in Toronto.
After doing some research on investigative genetic genealogy, or IGG, Steve called up Othram Labs.
David was amazing. He and Kristen would bend over backwards for us. The two of them really want to solve cold cases. That's their passion in life.
David Middleman and his wife Kristen founded Othram Labs in 2018. Together, they have worked on very difficult cases, including one dating back to 1881.
The victim was left outside a barn in 1881, and we were able to identify her as a 19-year-old school teacher that was murdered. Cases where the victim was thrown in a sewage tank. It's actually a Canadian case. He was known as Septic Tank Sam, and we were able to help identify him. Cases where there was only 0.12 nanograms of DNA, and it was a mixture of perpetrator and victim. That's about 15 human cells. If I touch my hand, I've left hundreds of cells. So 15 cells from 32 years ago, and we were able to identify that perpetrator.
The greatest sort of enemy of a DNA sample, if you will, are moisture and heat. So once you get something into a dried stain form, it's very stable, sometimes for multiple decades. But you don't know what's happened to some of these samples along the way, how they've been stored, whether there's been, bacterial activity or just any kind of environmental change that's basically going to break the DNA down.
And there's the problem of limited supply.
Every time you sequence DNA, you consume it. And so when you consume it, there's no going back. Even if you don't get an answer, if you don't get enough markers, you can't get more of it. And unfortunately, with that goes someone's chance to identify a perpetrator, to get justice.
That's why they won't even touch crime scene DNA until they are sure they can get a result.
Every sample is different. Every sample is found under different weather conditions, different terrain, different types of bacteria that are involved with it, animal DNA that may or may not have been involved in the crime scene. There's so many different types of inputs that it makes it really difficult to build one test, one way to extract the DNA, one way. And so we don't have one way.
They are creating a catalog of tests for every scenario.
We simulate mock cases with various different DNA profiles that aren't casework profiles and that aren't impossible to go back and collect more of. Once we feel confident and it's worked on the research side for 3 to 6 months, then we start to pull the process back into the forensic side.
What piqued Steve's interest is the level of detail they can pull out of a sample. The most common DNA tests look at about 20 different markers that help pinpoint a specific individual.
It's great for court because it's an elimination of everybody except the one person. The only problem is you have to find that one person. If it's a known suspect, it's great. If it's an unknown suspect, we're back to the needle in the haystack.
We build a DNA profile that has hundreds and hundreds of SNP markers.
The closer you're related to somebody, the more of the similarities in those markers you'll have. The further away you're related, the less of those markers that you'll have.
When that profile is uploaded to genealogical databases, what happens is you get really distant relatives. You can get a sixth cousin, a fifth cousin, a third cousin.
So we utilize that to be able to narrow down our person of interest pool to certain families. And once we get to those families, we narrow it down further to provide us the family of the offender.
You can't go directly to one person. This technology allows you to go to a generation in a family tree.
Detective Smith reached out to forensic expert Monica Sloan.
Detective Smith contacted me sometime in 2019 to talk about, do we have enough sample left? And, I sort of went through and gave him a number, and he said, yeah, we can do that. We prepared a sample for him, and it went off to Othram.
Detective Smith said it only took 6 weeks for them to have a profile they could compare against DNA submitted to ancestry websites. Currently, there are only 2 that work with police.
People have to utilize a pay-per-use company and then actually physically move their profile over to either GEDmatch or Family Tree DNA and click yes for police involvement. And then we can get a match list that shows all the people in the world that have uploaded their DNA that may be related to our offender and how closely related they are. It's very clear at that point that the family is from Northern Ontario. All the families on our list were originating from the James Bay area.
Detective Constable James Atkinson said that with so many matches, he thought they were going to be done in a day. Instead, they encountered the problem of endogamy.
We run into a lot in Canada, more than I ever expected, with our Indigenous communities, our religious communities, and even small rural areas. Back in the 1800s, families intermarried more than once. If you get a suspect, let's suppose his grandparents were first cousins. Well, then now your charts are completely useless because he's his own cousin.
That made the job of zeroing in on their offender extremely complicated. Eventually, they made some headway.
We got a particularly good match, and he was a university professor, quite a bit higher than the other matches. And we could also see that he was related to the mother of our suspect.
Detective Sergeant Steve Smith said he was related, but not closely. It took them a year to work their way down, first to 26 families, and then to a single family of 5 brothers.
We started narrowing the brothers down. One brother was on the National DNA Data Bank. It wasn't him because we didn't receive a match. Second brother was actually a murder victim himself. And so his DNA was on our crime scene index. There was no hit there between our DNA from our offender and his DNA from his crime scene, so both those brothers are eliminated. We have 3 more brothers. We picked the 2 that were most accessible to us. We were able to obtain their DNA, and CFS was able to eliminate both of those brothers, so we knew that we were down to 1 brother.
His name was Joseph George Sutherland, and he lived in the northern town of Moosonee, Ontario.
We all looked at this case, all our investigators, and he was our last choice by everybody to be our actual offender. He had no criminal record, he had no police involvement, he had his university degree, he'd worked for years in northern communities in IT capacity. There was just nothing there that said in his previous life or as he was younger, he was able to, sexually assault and murder 2 women.
Regardless, Detective Constable James Atkinson followed the lead.
His name had been dropped by one of the people that I had tapped into to help out with, a local genealogist. And she agreed with me. She goes, no, I worked with him. He's a computer geek. She didn't think it was him either. He doesn't look like a killer. When you look at his Facebook page, he looked like a guy that I would be working with and go out for a beer after work. There was nothing about him at all.
Detective Sergeant Steve Smith said they had done all their due diligence to narrow it down. And although they believed they had their suspect, they couldn't be 100% sure until they had scientific confirmation.
Well, at this point, we have to get a DNA sample. He's in a remote community, basically a fly-in community, or you take the train. And how are we going to get that sample?
So what do you do?
At this point, we pitched the idea that we were going to write a DNA warrant and we're going to fly to Moosonee and we're going to take a portion of his blood to test against our offender profile that we have. The problem with that is once we take his DNA, what are we going to do? Because we're going to be leaving him in a community. If he is the actual offender, what's going to be the fallout of that? It's not your usual day when you're hopping on a plane to fly to basically the base of the Arctic Circle. We're coming into Moosonee. It's very different from Toronto. It's a very small town, only a certain number of people. We go to the police detachment, and then we decide we're gonna go find George. We go to his house, we see his truck there. So we knock on his door, he answers it. I ask him who he is. He says he's George Sutherland. At that point, I advise him that we have a warrant to take his blood for something that happened in Toronto long ago. I could instantly see in his head that he was in a panic. His first question was, do I have to come? I said, we have a warrant, you have to come. He's like, okay, let me just get my boots on. He put his boots, his coat on. So we get in the car, we're driving back to the detachment. It's about a 4-minute drive. George's breathing is labored. He looks over at me and he says, where did this happen? I said, Toronto, and I heard him take a deep breath, almost like the wind was knocked out of him. He took about 30 seconds and then said to me, when did this happen? And all I said to him was, a long time ago. And you could just hear his breathing. He could barely get air into his body, but he didn't say a word. It's very interesting when you're sitting in a room alone with somebody that you know has committed these heinous offenses. I mean, you're looking at this person and he's an older man now, and you just don't see it in him.
Toronto Police Detective Constable Amy Lukens also traveled with Detective Sergeant Steve Smith to Moosonee to help execute the warrant.
When we execute the actual DNA warrant, we make sure that it's video and audio recorded so that we can go back and sort of review it. But another reason is because on camera and on audio, people are able to see the seal numbers that I'm going to be sealing that sample up with, so that we make sure that we have proper continuity. He didn't seem nervous, but he also wasn't talkative. I find I've done many DNA warrants, and I find typically when I'm in there doing it, I'm talking to the individual about what it is that I'm doing, and they'll usually speak back to me. He didn't really have much to say at all.
And then we drive him back to his home. We ask him if he's all right. We say, you know, if you're struggling, give us a call the OPP. Here's some pamphlets of people you can call if you need to talk to somebody. And he told us he was all right and he was fine and he was just gonna go in his house and relax for a bit. So we hop back on the OPP jet and we fly back to Toronto. Amy immediately takes the DNA in for testing at the Center of Forensic Science.
I think it was a little strange to then pack everything up, get on the plane, and fly back to Toronto without Mr. Sutherland with us. There was a little bit of sort of feeling anxious about when are we going to get the results back from CFS.
That was Wednesday that we flew up, and that Wednesday night I actually went to one of my daughter's hockey tournaments in Detroit. And the next day I receive a call from Sean Glassford at the OPP, and he tells me that George has confessed to the 2 murders to an ex-OPP officer in Moosonee.
I was at home and my phone rang, and when I saw that it was Detective Sergeant Smith, I thought to myself, what did I forget a seal number? Did I do something wrong in the Center of Forensic Science submission? But fortunately, no, it was letting me know that there had been a confession.
So he's told it to an ex-OPP officer that lives in Moosonee now. And that OPP officer had called, obviously, current OPP officers to advise that his friend, George, because they were friends, had called him over and confessed that he had sexually assaulted and murdered 2 women in Toronto when he was young. And he was asking him if DNA could convict him on these offenses. He was obviously told yes. It was unbelievable, but I mean, that's policing, right? It changes in a heartbeat.
Toronto police informed Erin Gilmour's younger brother, Sean McCowan, and Susan Tice's daughter, Christian, that they had identified the killer.
Probably one of the best moments of my life. I'm with a whole group of friends, and Steve, whenever he calls, his phone comes up as no caller ID, so I always know it's him. I walked outside the place I was watching football, and he says, "We got him," and literally broke into tears. It was like just a moment like where you're just feels like you are letting go of like 40 years of anticipation. 40 years of trauma and 40 years of waiting, and you just wanted justice. And it's sort of, to hear those words, "we got him," was just like unleashed a torrent of anguish and joy for my mom and for my brother and for our family and friends. And it was cathartic.
Yes! I was so excited. I mean, I called Chizzy right away. I was like blown away that he was so young. Did not expect that. I was expecting like a 35-year-old or 40-year-old or something. But to know that he was 22, like it's just so sad. And so then it changed my mind of thinking, okay, he must have been filled with such rage. And there's this fascination. You're looking at this person, like the picture that they had in the paper. And I was like, oh my God, like you did it? Because he looked harmless.
Meanwhile, Detective Sergeant Steve Smith said officers made the trip back to Northern Ontario.
So immediately our officers are on the plane Friday morning, and we're back up in Moosonee. We have him on video appear in court in Toronto. He's remanded to custody, and some of our other officers fly to Moosonee and bring him back to Toronto.
Joseph Sutherland admitted in a courtroom Tuesday that 40 years ago he killed 2 women 4 kilometers and 4 months apart. A huge relief for the family of one of the victims who hugged police outside court after Sutherland pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder.
He basically admitted that he was unlawfully in both their residences. It wasn't specifically set out that he did break in, but it was that he was unlawfully in their residences and that he did sexually assault both women and stab them to death.
Do we know why?
That's the one thing that we don't know, is why.
Joseph George Sutherland sat quietly as he was sentenced to life in prison with no chance of parole for 21 years. A long time coming for the families of the victims.
You want to see a number of 100, but at the same time, 21 years in light of the fact that the max it could be was 25 is a pretty decent outcome, I think.
We're really pleased with the outcome.
This has been dogging all of us for 40 years, and we've wanted to find out, who did it and why and what this guy's name was, and finally we got there.
He's finally going to be put in jail, and for me, I feel safe now.
He tried to be a better man after the second killing, and he did become a better man. You can't deny him that.
Sean McCowan choked back tears and looked at Sutherland, who is now 62. You went on to live your life, had a career, got married, and had a son, celebrated birthdays, and created a Facebook page. You had 40 years to come forward and take responsibility and apologize for your actions. You did nothing except go on living your life. For both Sean McCowan and Christian Tice, finding justice was a huge relief.
Getting that phone call I felt like I had grown 3 inches. I literally felt like I had been unburdened, and not with the weight of Erin, but with the weight of the unknown. I used to walk around and sort of, be looking over my shoulder. Was it you, or was it you? You have children and people in your life, and they will give testament to this, but you sort of are always like, let me know when you get home, because you sort of live with this fear that, they're not going to be there or something's going to happen. That's a hard way to live.
I think that people don't really understand that when you lose someone in such a horrific way, it's not over within a year. And we can look now, 40 years later, I think of all the ways that, I protect myself. You do see people in a different light. Not that I'm suspicious and I don't hate men. It's just, you just have a difference of knowing that they weaponize parts of themselves. And I think of my choices of where I live, the choices of what I do to try to keep myself safe. So there is this underlying thing that you're not conscious of. There's this shadow behind you that dictates kind of the things that you say and how you talk and how you interact with people. Because I was terrified that it was going to be some psychopathic weirdo maniac that had no remorse. So to see him express remorse and cry, I know everybody said, oh, it's put on, but I well, maybe I'm a sucker, but I believed it, and it made it more human. Even though it's the most atrocious thing and the most horrific thing, there's still that part of me that I'm like, well, I kind of felt compassion, and I'm like, I'm so conflicted and confused because I'm like, there's something wrong. Like, you gotta hate this person, but it made it just made me realize that this is such a tragedy for everybody involved.
You know, sometimes it's very, very difficult not to go down the path of where would Erin have been now? Who would she have married? What would her children have looked like? Wondering who your sister would have been, how you would have grown old together. It's a hard place to be.
If it weren't for people uploading their DNA into a family ancestry database, this wouldn't work.
I know that some people are, very much against it, but what I would say is it's literally bringing resolve, relief, peace, in some instances closure to a lot of people because they're doing it. I can't thank the people enough that do it.
Christian Middleman, the co-founder of Othram, agrees.
I believe that if this type of technology was used, we could live in a world where there were no cold cases, where people got these answers in real time and didn't have to wait decades to find out what happened to their loved one. And I think that I don't believe in closure. Closure is not something that you can get from something this terrible, but I do believe in the truth allowing people to turn the page to the next chapter of their life faster. There's just hundreds of thousands of these cases all over the world, and it does seem like an insurmountable task if you think about one lab working all of these cases. That was never our intent. If you do something in a way that's predictable and robust, then you can train others to do the same thing. We're hoping to do that in Canada very shortly. We actually have Othram Canada registered, and we're moving to Canada to help others build this technology in-house. We hope that forensic labs and universities across the world will start to use this technology themselves, and there'll be thousands of Othrams in the next few years.
However, Toronto Police Deputy Chief Rob Johnson said until then, there are challenges that police have to work through.
That would be amazing, but the reality is the amount of crime that's committed, the resources that are attributed to it, and the emerging technologies that criminals use. We're sort of a step behind to play catch up, and the important thing is to make sure that the community understands or knows that the police will never close a case without exhausting all leads. Having spent a number of years in forensics, I've been involved in a number of cases, homicides, other serious crimes that are still on a shelf waiting to be solved. All these at some point get an opportunity to be reviewed, and the same sort of current technology used to hopefully find a suspect.
Erin's brother knows there are many unsolved murders in Canada, and he hopes people will hear his sister's story and have a little bit of hope that something can be done.
I'm going to start a foundation here basically to try to raise some money for unsolved cases, and I'm going to work with Othram, and we're going to try to raise some money and assist the Toronto Police and get more genetic genealogy cases across the finish line, and that's hopefully a great legacy for Erin.
Every life is a universe, and for Christian Tice and Ann Chisholm, better known as Chizzy, Susan made theirs just a little bit better.
The best compliment I've ever gotten is when someone says, "You're a lot like your mom," and it just makes my heart sing.
She had a great smile. I can see her smile, yeah. I just want to make her real, that she was a strong, beautiful, really quite powerful woman. And I'm very pleased to say I was her friend, and she was mine. We used to sing, "I Am Woman," Helen Reddy. We'd sing it in the car full blast. And that's on her grave. It says, "I am woman."
She embraced life. She lived in the fast lane too, like drove fast, sang fast. I mean, she was talented. She was a photographer, an artist, singer. Like, she had it all. She really did. Like, she's one of those extraordinary people. For me, her legacy is that she had 4 children, but none of us felt neglected. We all felt special. She managed to take each of us and find that thing that we all loved and helped us be the best Awesome, awesome woman. I loved her very much. And I miss her every day.
The Toronto Police Cold Case Unit investigates hundreds of homicides, thousands of sex assaults, and also looks at unidentified human remains. As of May 10th, 2024, about 40 cases have been resubmitted for IgG analysis, and that's led to the identification of over 30 suspects. Thanks so much for listening. Crime Beat is hosted by me, Nancy Hixt. This episode originally aired on Crime Beat TV on May 10th, 2024, and was reported on by Catherine McDonald. For photos and other information on this story, please head to Global News. I'll add the link to the show notes. To watch this episode, please subscribe to the Crime Beat TV YouTube channel. This episode was adapted to podcast by our senior producer, Dila Velasquez. Audio and sound design by Rob Johnston. Thanks again for listening. Please join me next time on Crime Beat.